All right. Welcome back to the podcast, man. Uh, we're going to be talking about deflation today, kind of like we were talking earlier.
Mhm,
Something that, we'll get into that because, technically, according to the Federal Reserve and some economists, there's like a 0% risk for deflation. But I beg to differ based on Great Depression in 2008. But we'll get into that part in a second.
mhm,
We've been talking about tariffs and stuff like that people have in general and how it's impacting, the common person. So Walmart's CEO came out earlier in the month and I guess they reiterated it this week that they are not looking to raise prices. Um, they it says more than two-thirds of products sold in Walmart in the United States stores are grown or assembled in the country. So, I think like a good chunk of their products, it's only a third of their products that comes from all over the world. And I think that's like your smaller items, you know what I mean? Or
mhm.
certain big ticket items, like I don't do they even make any TV in the United States? I don't think we do.
Well, I think a lot of the, I think just a lot of products in general from anyone and anywhere. Um, you know, it's when you look at the broad scheme of everything, it's instantly like, oh, prices across the board. And it's like, but no, because if it's not coming from this designated area, then it's not going to
Right.
have an issue. It's not it's not a, a broad tax. It's a consumer tax. If you don't want this one, it's just like going and buying a water heater or something like that. If you want this one, then you have to also purchase this, and this. If you don't want to have to purchase this, and this, then you purchase this one. Same thing with all the, and I think a majority of products, just because we're so used to the things that we pick up and purchase, say, made in China, made in China, made in China. It's like, well, yeah, but there are like you can purchase. I know it's always a joke because I think with Trump they've mentioned like I don't know if it was his Bibles or his hats, like his "Make America Great Again"
Oh
hats or
yeah, in
whatever it was,
China.
but it's made in China. It's like, well, yeah, you can purchase a flag, whether it's a U.S. flag or it's a Canadian flag or it's of your local sports team. You can purchase one that was made in China. You can also purchase one that was made at a local city. So.
Yeah, I think when I go into Walmart, generally the only thing I really go there for is my prescriptions when I get them because they're cheapest deal with my health
Mhm,
insurance. But every time I see USA flags there, God, I think since right after 9/11, when that whole patriotic thing kind of went down, all their flags there, at least, I haven't, have I looked at every package? No, but the vast majority of them seem to say made in USA,
yeah.
and now here's the problem with quote unquote made in USA, right? Our definitions of made in USA are not always really made in USA
All right.
because certain things are allowed to say assembled in USA and certain things
Hmm.
are allowed to say made in USA, even though they're both put together in a factory right next to
Hmm.
each other. It could be,
Hmm.
but just because the percentages of the products are a little bit different, they can say different words. And to me, made in USA should be like 90% domestic.
Yeah, I
Outside of
think.
that, it should say assembled.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I can't remember if it was I can't remember if it was like a bottle of shampoo or something. I can't remember what exactly it was, but there was a product where it says, you know, made in or manufactured in, USA with foreign parts,
Yeah.
or and so you do get a lot of that, and I think it's totally fair to say, yeah, not everything was manufactured because there are a lot of things that we just don't manufacture here, whether it's based on the resources that we do or do not have, or it's ways for them to get around certain labor practices, and just for it to be cheaper. Um,
Oh yeah.
I think that, I mean, you can technically get away with a lot of things by saying, it's made in USA, because if
Oh yeah.
somebody brings you, eh, if you get, I'm trying to think of something that has just like two or three components to it. Um, but if you get a, I don't know, Tupperware or something, and like
Right.
the base of it comes from China, and then the tops come from like Indonesia, but then they put it together and stamp Rubbermaid or whatever on it in the U.S. Like, Well, I mean, it was made in the U.S., but with foreign parts. Um, so
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it's gonna be it'll be tricky for them to kind of walk that line. But yeah, I definitely do think that. I mean, Ford Motor Company. I mean, it's a U.S. based automotive company, but not every part comes from the U.S. A lot
yeah.
of
But
it
out of
is
the, I know out of the, I think big three, I think they're the most American out of the big three in terms of the amount of parts that are sourced here.
there's yeah, and I mean you can always tell by the VIN of the vehicle, like where it was manufactured. But that's another
Oh,
thing. Like I said, there's gonna be so anytime you see so if you see a one, four, or five, the vehicle itself was manufactured in the States. If you see a two, it was manufactured in Canada. If you see a three, it was manufactured in Mexico. If it starts with a K, it's Korea, J, Japan,
oh,
so
okay.
on and so forth. Yeah, that's how it kind of like the VIN breaks down. So if you ever look out at your vehicle and you got the 17-digit VIN, if it starts with a one, four, or five, that's going to be that the vehicle itself was assembled in the United States. Um, Again, two is going to be Canada, three is going to be Mexico, seven is New Zealand, so on and so forth. Um, but again, these like there are a lot of American companies, and I would love to be able to say I have all the knowledge as it pertains to how exactly they started all of that. But yeah, it's a US or it's an American company or it's a US company, but so much of it is based off of parts that they get from other countries. And so when there are the like the auto tariffs, there are there are Toyotas that are manufactured here in the States. So it's like, but that's a Japanese company. Now, is it because it was founded in Japan? Like, is that the reason that it's a Japanese company, like Toyota and Lexus, or
Right.
like so? Again, it's a very fine line, and I'm not sure exactly how they come up with which side of the coin. I don't know if it's a better than 50%. Like if 51% of the products are here in the U.S., then we can go ahead and say made in U.S. Because who's to say if we take what if we have 100% of the parts for the um, the F-150, right? If we take if we have the 100% of the parts here, but then it's manufactured, like all the parts get shipped to Mexico, and then they assemble it there, and they bring is that still made in USA? Well, no, it was made in Mexico with US parts. So,
Right. So this was interesting while we're talking about that. I'm reading a little bit more about the Walmart thing. I was earlier, and Ferner had said from Walmart that more than 60% of all U.S. suppliers they used last year were small businesses.
mhm,
Um, I guess with the tariffs and everything, they pretty much were like, hey, they're going on the, build in America kick, and which is great for us in the long term.
mhm,
Um, I thought that was pretty cool. Walmart open call event, I guess, is going to be June 24th for US based small and medium sized businesses. We'll get a chance to pitch their shelf ready products directly to Walmart and Sam's Club merchants, which I
mhm,
think is like, it's great because they're finally like, I'm not going to lie. I'm very shocked that 60% of their suppliers are small businesses in America.
mhm.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that before I looked.
Yeah,
Never
it's
guessed it.
I think a lot of it too is because they do have so they have as everyone knows Walmart has been trying to compete with Amazon in that space. And
Mhm.
so much of Amazon, as everyone knows, like Amazon doesn't really own anything. They're just the beneficiary of being able to distribute products for people.
Yep.
And so because so many like small businesses, mostly like apparel stuff, but because so many small businesses have attached themselves to Amazon because it's so easy to set up, um, Walmart has been trying, and most of that stuff is, done via their online. So once they started to, because you go into a store and some of the stuff, like I'm not a big Amazon fan. I can't say the same thing for my wife. My wife loves Amazon. But
No, I do too. I
a,
can't lie. I'm an Amazon
a
guy.
lot of the stuff, if I order from, I'll order it from Walmart's website, but that's because it's again, it's online, so their catalog is much greater, and you can actually see, like, oh, this is from, Bob Smitherman's, bike shop or whatever it is,
Oh
and you
yeah.
can actually see that it's, you can kind of look at all the products that they have available, which is, it's not too dissimilar from, like, I used to be a big eBay purchaser. I got
Mhm.
away from eBay for a while, but I was huge on eBay, and it reminds me of that. Not necessarily like the whole bidding thing or auctioning, but it's, and Amazon is just too. I don't know.
It,
I think with the when COVID
it's a
happened,
gray area company.
I think when, for me, the turnoff for Amazon was the COVID and the business relief that they were distributing, and I watched, and I'm not against anyone making any types of money, but I watched friends of mine who have small businesses. I watched them shutter during COVID, and I watched them, struggle to get legitimate, aid that they were told that they'd be able to get, and watch them have to jump through hoops to be able to stay afloat. Whereas you have these multi-billion, trillion-dollar companies, and it's like, oh yeah, no problem. We're gonna go ahead and get these loans as well.
Well, see, that's part like that exactly right there is why I bring up the term deflation,
Mhm.
right? And why I think inflation and how we're looking at it, at least in this day and age, because we haven't really had a pandemic in 100 years, beside now COVID, but a lot of inflation was caused because of the money that they were pumping into everything. It fueled demand so much that a lot of companies are just now in the last year or so catching up several
Mhm.
years after it ended. You
Mhm.
know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should let everybody, sit on the street and die and blah blah blah, like doomsdayers would say when you say something like that,
Right.
right? No, but like you were saying, Amazon should have been one of the companies getting the huge benefits, right? It should have been your local mom and pop shop that this is probably going to be their retirement. Hey, here's, like they were giving certain people 50K a year to stay home. Hey, your small business, here's, I don't know, 70K per, interest holder, depending on, how much percentage you mail into us or whatever, right? Something like
Right.
that. That would keep that small business owner afloat for the next year
Mhm.
while we're trying to get through this, right? Because Amazon could have financially weathered that storm. So could most big corporations, right? The government could have went in and said, "Hey, we'll give you a tax abatement for 6 months," something of that nature, right? And what that would have done is that wouldn't have pumped so much money so fast in the economy and drove the debt up, but it would have also kept everybody's heads above water. People wouldn't have went without, you know, and I think that that's what really drove inflation. And I voted for our current president. I voted for him the last election. Uh, you know, they were trying to do the right thing. Even when he was giving up, they were trying to, like, you know, as much as he was like calling it, how he was calling it the China virus, however you want to word it, right?
I love the
Um,
way he would say it too.
right, the China virus. It's like, my gosh, man. Like, despite all that, you knew that he really wasn't completely sure about what was going on. To be fair, I don't think anybody really was, not even doctors. They're just kind of
Nobody,
sitting here going, right,
nobody did.
everybody. To me, our current inflation situation is a result of our government not being prepared and panicking. That is why we're in the spot that we're in, right? George Bush alluded to this when he was in office. Barack Obama alluded to this when he was in office. Even Donald Trump, when he first got into office, alluded to this. Like, hey, we don't got enough stuff set aside to where if there's a pandemic, we can keep afloat. So if the government didn't sit there and rack up however many trillions, so I think what over the last several years, including COVID, it was like 5, 6, $7 trillion. You know,
We've
um,
we've blown through. I think it's nearly $10 trillion in the last, since COVID. Like, since they started doling out a lot of this money. So for the better part of 5 years now, I think we're
right.
somewhere around like $10 trillion.
So like what is like part of like what I don't think they really like tell people is, and this is where I think I always say like, hey, there's got to be a middle ground, right? Like, so they generally, to me, when they go, we want inflation, right? To me, that's just to reflect numbers that your country is growing. In reality, what does inflation really do for the average person? It doesn't do nothing. It's just so the government or whoever can churn out a report and say we're growing our country.
Nope.
Because all inflation does to anybody who makes a dollar is erode it.
Hmm. Yeah, your
Unless your
dollar.
wages are right. So it's like why are we cheering for this? You really don't want long-term deflation either. But
Hmm.
I mean, the fact that like, well, we have a targeted inflation rate. Why? You're targeting. So if I get a 2% raise and your target's 2.5%, that means every year I'm losing 0.5% of the value of my money, which means every year I'm going to be able to buy that much less.
Yeah,
And I
your
don't think,
purchasing power goes down more and
yeah,
more.
and we don't talk about that enough to people, and it's like, hey, the way they're doing the money, when they come out and they go, we're gonna help everybody with all this stuff, and like it's not even necessarily like Joe Biden wanted to eliminate student loans, right? And to be honest, I'm not against it because the last 30 years, how student loans really kind of were set up, it was a scam.
It
I mean,
was,
they,
but
they
that's
they,
the
they put
government.
everybody in a position, right? Well, it's crazy to me that we, the taxpayer, have to pay a higher rate than a bank.
my my issue with the student loans is, so you want the taxpayer, you want the burden to go to the taxpayer, to us, to pay for the loan that somebody who graduated, and the statistics show that those who genuinely get their degree, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, whatever it is, those people tend to earn substantially more. So you want the highest earners to get their loans forgiven and then put the burden on the taxpayers. And I
Well,
think with inflation, it's a one of those situations. It's twofold, because it's too many dollars chasing too few product, but we have a government spending problem. We've always had the government spending problem,
right.
and that's why it's always so profound when, like, when Trump says it and people don't pay attention to it just because they're angry because he's a mean orange man. But it's we took in, like, after his tax cuts, after his 2017 tax cuts, we took in more tax dollars than we ever have,
Right.
but yet the deficit continued to grow. That
Yeah,
means the
because the government
government
keeps
is
spending.
spending too much money. That's why I'm not against Doge, and I understand people are like, oh well, it's too aggressive with this. Yeah, but you have to be aggressive with anything. Like,
Yeah, I think the problem was is that they were going into information maybe that until they were some of them were properly vetted to be safe, shouldn't have been diving into. Certain person. I'm not against them getting into like the financials, right?
mhm.
But I think especially when it comes to the average citizen, I don't think it's okay that these guys are in there looking at their exact social security numbers, their exact like their address. It should be like because like social security and stuff like that, they can they have ways of like when they print out statements, right? And they got the statistics, right? Like person age, blah blah blah, da da da. Okay, now we found this, however many people it is that's getting paid over the age of 150, which nobody's ever lived that long in history that we know of. You know, them like at that point you go, okay, you can go to the Treasury Secretary or to a judge and go, hey, we found ABC. This is what we're seeing fraud wise, da da da. We, the federal government needs to do this. You get a judge's permission or you get congressional involved. If they would have went that route, to me, that's a common sense route, right? Because if a company was letting some random person get your information and look at it, there'd be lawsuits galore. That
There
company
would.
would be paying out the Yahoo. So it's again like I'm saying, it's not the bad thing that they're looking at it. There just should have been a couple more steps before they were reviewing people's like. I'm not saying the financial end of it, but the personal end of it.
I like I agree, but then there's also the devil's advocate that also kind of screams at me from time to time, and it's one of those situations where with the government slow walks everything. Like,
Yeah,
when they want their money, they better get it now, or they're garnishing your wages. They're coming after you. They're going to take your house. They're going to take everything, right? Whereas when they owe you money, it's like, well, give us some time. And the so much has been slow walked for the government for so long, and it's sometimes you have to go to the extreme for it to happen. And whether it's, sometimes, for people who invest in real estate, it's like you can look at a house and go, you know what, we can either go room by room and try to do a renovation. Maybe we just knock the whole house down and build the house exactly the way we want to. And with if I think if they would have taken time, because there is, you know the House, the Senate, and the White House are all under Republican control right now.
Yes.
Well, if they would have slow walking it and going through all the means and proper channels, I guess if you want to put it that way, I think by the time that everything would have gotten the okay, I think that, as what typically happens in the midterms, I think the midterms flip the House, and then there's not going to be the support, because there's 4 years sounds like a long time, but
It's
it's
not.
been
We'll blink and it'll be that.
yeah, exactly. And so if I I know there's a different way to put it, but I think that when there is a mandate, and
Hmm.
people will say that maybe that there wasn't, but I think if somebody campaigns on a certain something and they say I'm doing this, and this, I I personally think that there should be, kind of, I don't know if I'd say a blueprint, but there should be kind of some parameters where, some federal judges or whatever it is kind of step back, or Congress kind of steps back and go, okay, so this is what this person is projecting that they're going to do. And they are saying,
Right.
if I am elected, this is what I am doing, full stop. And I know it's weird because we get a lot of politicians we got that, campaign on something, and then they don't do anything. They just coast.
Well,
And
like how?
so I think that with them coming in and just saying, hey, listen, we're like, the people that are so upset that a lot of this stuff is happening are the same people that also, like, we put our information into everything. We put our information into everything. Oh,
Right.
you want free shipping. Oh, you want a free 3 month trial. Like, our information is already had. Like, we all know
True.
it's, I mean, I know it's a lot of movie spin and stuff, but if the government wants something to happen to you, it's going to happen to you.
Right.
And so I don't have concerns about somebody who's worth hundreds of billions of dollars or their team having my information. So if you want to be me, I mean, aside from my wife, you can have anything else, man. You can take anything of mine. Just don't take my wife, and then we're gonna be good. But
Oh yeah.
I don't have any issue with that, because the government is not even secretive. It's this, I don't like, who do you think you are? Like, I feel like the government looks at us as a sense of, again, who do you think you are? Like, no, we don't work for you. Just because you may or may not have voted for us, like, we don't have to answer to you. No. Yes, you think you're entitled to it, and yeah, that's the way the system was set up, but we don't have to tell you anything. And we won't tell you anything because we don't have to. And so having somebody come in with a wrecking ball and saying, okay, fine, don't tell us, we're going to get you out of the way, and we're going to do it anyway. And then, like, um yeah, it doesn't look too good. And a lot of people whose hairs are on fire, it's, yeah, these were a lot of your projects, because you can't tell me. And for someone who's, helped businesses and helped multi-unit establishments, kind of put together their budgets and stuff, you can't tell me that you're taking in more money now than you ever have before, but yet you're still losing 1.5 to $2.5 trillion a year. Like, how are you creating a $2 trillion deficit when you're taking in more money now than you ever have before? So, so
Oh
something
yeah.
is
It's
wrong.
insane, and that's part of why our money's worthless.
Mm-hmm.
So like, like when looking at that and looking at deflation, it was like historical deflationary periods was one of the kind of things where I was just kind of browsing. I mean, it's something that I think of and I look at that kind of stuff. I don't want to be 11:30 at night and yes, what was it yesterday? I think was it yesterday, day before? No, last night I think I made those tigers videos, right? the AI videos, and it's just
Mhm.
I just sit there and I'll be in the garage and it just like pops in my head, and I'm like, okay, boom, and I just go.
Right.
But so I was looking up like the his two of the biggest outside of the 1800s, which I guess it's really to me it's kind of hard to include the 1800s because things were just we were just forming.
Way
But
different.
before I get into that, when we're talking about budgets, and then I'll jump right back into this. It'll be a quick question, history question. I know the answer, but I just want to see because it's not very common knowledge for most people. Who was the only president in U.S. history to pay off the national debt and run a surplus?
Um,
Only one.
Clinton
There's
comes.
only
Clinton comes to mind.
no. Andrew Jackson.
Really?
After the war, when he became president, he sold off a lot of government assets, completely paid off the national debt. The U.S. government didn't owe anybody anything, and had a budget surplus.
No
Because they
kidding.
were expanding into territories, things of that nature. He from when you kind of look at the historical, he was not a very good person per se, but yeah, I thought that was a very, very, very interesting fact.
Yeah,
Um,
that's because I
yeah,
mean, like I remember, to my knowledge, um, because
Clinton ran a budget
the
surplus.
Clinton, yeah, Clinton was the last president that we had, in which case we had a surplus.
So part of that is parts of the government debt. What he did was, and it's not like a super ton, but like it kind of had already started, I believe, under Nixon, or I think it's either Nixon, Carter, or Ford, one of those guys, right around there. Is so like our government doesn't classify certain things as debt;
Hmm.
they classify them as an obligation, and when they do that, they're not counting it as debt. So if the government actually counted its obligations as debt, we're really like over 100 something trillion in debt, that we're obligated. So yeah, but they don't talk about that, and because if they really talked about that, there'd be like an epic economic collapse. Like it would
Oh
just
yeah.
be catastrophic. Um, because when you talk about like things like Medicare, all that kind of stuff long term, that with our bills in Congress that we've guaranteed our citizens, and I think that's just something that's got to be balanced out. And I think the problem is while I'm a capitalist, first our healthcare system doesn't work like a capitalist system. It's not even a system. It's just a bunch of local shops popping up and charging you random prices. But that's a whole different conversation. So getting back to the historical deflation thing, I just got off that Andrew Jackson one was like flooring to me.
Mhm.
Um, the Great Depression. Now, the Roaring Twenties prices, kind of went up. And in the Roaring Twenties, the only people who really benefited were people in the city. Because back then the inner city was where everybody wanted to be. The suburbs weren't really as much of a thing yet.
Hmm.
So those are the only people who really benefited from the Roaring Twenties. And then when it came to, prices had skyrocketed so much, and part of the big thing with the Roaring Twenties was people were buying stocks on, like, essentially it was like a version of credit. And if the stock dropped below that certain dollar amount, you owed the difference. Well, all these people were losing their jobs. They did not have the money to cover the difference on those stocks. And then, along with what some of the bankers and everything had done, and what our government had done, gold and all that, boom, pulled the rug out from underneath. But I think that was a learning experience because we had only been on the fiat currency system, or gold standard, Federal Reserve, however you want to call it, or the Federal Reserve System. Better way to put it. I think since what 1914, 1917, so what, like 10 years or so. So it was. I think the depression was caused by back then that type of currency system, even around the world, was still brand new. Nobody really knew what was coming down the road.
Hmm.
So and then that's when FDR had passed some of the bills he did to give, which now it's kind of, it was needed then, but it's not needed now as much, to give a floor to certain prices. Like it can't, like, when they say, I'm sure you've heard, why do we pay farmers not to grow certain things? Well, they started doing that because farmers, just like a manufacturing company, right? They produce as much as you can to sell it. Well,
Hmm.
when they did that, that's a part of led to the deflation. Boom, surplus, the prices dropped. And then you had the dust storms, which caused like an inflation, but the prices were dropping. So you've got this demand, the inflated demand, and you got the dropping production. So it caused the pretty much caused the system to collapse. And then the second one, and this is to me the more interesting one because it's obviously a bit more relevant to us and to today, is the housing crisis in 2008. Now, places like McDonald's and all these companies were already kind of doing like value things before that. But a lot of companies, including manufacturers, your retailers, the housing crisis of 2008 to me really created what I like to call a value strategy by most consumer based companies and even some manufacturers in America. So, in order to, the government did prop a lot of things up, right? But it was just mainly banks. Everybody else kind of got told to get bent. Unless you're a bank or a certain manufacturer, you were left out high and dry. But what it did is like, a lot, even like McDonald's, but then you had like a company like Applebee's started coming out and they started discounting their products. Movie theaters really started to ramp up the rewards programs. You just started having all these things, which, it was a deflationary period, but it really helped the American consumer down the road. Now, granted, I'm not advocating for anybody to lose their jobs to cause lower prices or nothing, right? But when you look at like the housing market, right, they're going, well, it's not a bubble because the demand's still there. I'm like, the demand's still there because people are running on pure credit, just like they did right before the housing crash. Housing prices are insanely too high for the average American.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you got two people in that home making 60, 70, 80K a year, two, not one, two.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're living in what we used to call back in the day the McMansions, right? All the brand new subs. Like if you're living in one of those now, you're paying $2,500, $3,000 a month, if not more. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, man, like how do you people survive? And then you look at the average credit card debt in America, and you're like, oh, that's how you survive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and deflation, what that does is that raises the cost of their debt, and then that's how they lose their homes because they bought it at an inflated price, an inflated loan, and that puts their house underwater. And then in the house, the American home is generally our number one asset in terms of wealth generation, right? So it kills that. But at the same time, it's just the system's out of whack. So to me, I think, maybe not across the whole economy, but I do think there's going to be a lot of pockets of significant deflation coming. They're not talking about it. I mean, McDonald's, Wendy's, uh, Walmart, they're already all experiencing certain pockets of deflation, right? Like look at Walmart or look at McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King, the meal deals they came out with, right? Compared
Mm-hmm.
to you go buy a Big Mac meal, it's 7, 8, $9 depending where you're at, or you can get the $5. Wendy's 4 for $4, right? So you're kind of already seeing those deflationary things put a little pressure. But where those companies hurt is, obviously, the food industry is a very thin margin. You really cannot afford to lose very much.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think who is it else? Amazon is helping push deflation too, which is crazy because they were talking about how Amazon was going to put the tariff fee on everything, and Amazon's like, "Hey, whoa, we weren't going to do that." It was an idea that was kicked around that they actually never even really got out of a boardroom too much. It just kind of somebody talked about it, and then it spread like wildfire and got to the news. And
I think because with Amazon operating the way that they do, I think it could have just been whoever was selling that product. Like if it's Joe's water and they go to
right,
Joe and they can buy the exact same water from Fred rather than Joe, but Joe's like, oh hey, I've got this tariff, and then they put it on again. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the intricacies and like the inner workings of Amazon. That's where my wife gets a lot of the stuff every day. There's always 3 or 4 packages always on the front deck. But
I
um
just ordered some things earlier from
I think like that's I don't know if I don't know if it was necessarily or if it would have been Amazon specifically. I don't know if it was a directive that came from Bezos or whoever's,
Yeah, I think it was just an idea
operating
that was
that.
kicked around, caught fire.
Yeah. So
Excuse
I
me.
don't they There's because I mean I think too with that I think that's another one of those situations where I mean if you purchase a new vehicle, I have not ever purchased a brand new vehicle, and I do not advocate for anybody purchasing a brand new
Nope,
vehicle.
never will.
But you see there are like obviously there's tax, title, doc fees, right? But one of them is always like an import fee. So like they've been charging it for so long, and especially after like when COVID happened, they're like, "Oh, well, we had to get it here." It's like, okay, you had to get it here. I agree, but if you didn't have it here, you wouldn't sell it, and if you didn't sell it, then you wouldn't exist.
Right.
So, like, there's, whether they call it, I've seen them, destination fees,
Oh yeah, yeah.
destination
Oh,
fee
that's
or
famous with car
import fee, and
companies.
it's like again, that's I so dealerships have been doing it, and everybody, not everybody, but so many people seem to be wanting to purchase the next brand new vehicle. It's 2025 and they're already looking at 2026 as being rolled out in the next 2 months. And like, we need the 2026. Like, okay, so you're going to pay the destination fee, right? Or the tariff or the tax or whatever you want to call it. So you're going to pay it on the brand new vehicle, and you're not going to care the fact that the cost of the vehicle is $80,000, but you're upset because your avocados are going to go from 96 cents to 99 cents if you purchase the ones that come from Mexico.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. No,
it's the idea, again, the media, really
they're
making
fueling
people
the
question.
flames.
It's like, wait, hold on. So just so I understand this. So for the last 4 years, the president wasn't in charge of gas prices. The president wasn't in charge of prices at all. It was corporate greed. Corporate greed, corporate greed, corporate greed. That was really
It
the driver
was.
of inflation. That's what we were told for the last 4 years.
I
Your
mean, but
record,
to a
sky
degree,
high
it is.
record prices, 40-year high inflation, inflation at 9.1, 9.2%. The president couldn't do anything. It was corporate greed. That's what we were told by the media. But as soon as Trump takes office, oh, look at what Trump's doing to the economy. It's like, you just said for the last 4 years that the president doesn't control or dictate the economy. That's what you just said, and now you're flipping it over and saying, oh, he's driving up inflation. But, but no, like, you don't get to do that, and those are more reasons, obviously, as we've had conversations about, which is why people don't listen to the news anymore. But like, you can't have it both ways. If you want to say that it's only corporate greed that drives up prices, it drives up inflation when when the president or the administration is of a certain political lining, then you're lying and being
Right.
very disingenuous. Like, hey, yeah, we had sky high crazy prices, and if you're going to proclaim that the president has nothing to do with it, it's all corporate greed, then if that is to continue, then you have to, yep, it's corporate greed is doing it. But
Well, a
that's a
big thing really that I don't think that we don't really educate our citizens enough, our kids and our adults, nobody is really like, well, first, so I'll make it kind of like a two-part statement. The first one is, I think why a lot of people were saying corporate greed is, first, a lot of companies were going, oh man, these wage pressures, driving up prices, this, that, the other thing, blah, 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 right? Well, then you turn on the news and said company, record profits. Well, then how are those higher wages driving higher prices if you hit record profits? That's not math, and that's that toddler in math. It's this many's, you know.
that common core
It,
math.
right, and I think, and that's what creates the resentment among a lot of Americans towards corporate America. Like, it was like, I have said to my boss a bunch of times, like, again, I'm pro campus and pro business. I operate businesses, right? But what it is when people were needed more money and they were only getting a 1.5% raise, companies are going, we don't have money. And then they turn on TV, go on the internet, anywhere. Company makes record profits. And then that builds up resentment. And then you have people that vote a certain way because of that. And then, things of that nature. So to me, but kind of leading into that, what that is part of the corporate thing is like, a lot of people think that, like, okay, Exxon controls the price of gas and oil. Actually, our energy companies have zero, for the most part, not zero, but very little control, or not nowhere near as much control as people think, over the price of energy. It's set by the commodities markets, by the stock exchanges. That goes for beef, chicken, uh, you know, pork, corn, wheat, flour. Everything is controlled on a commodities market. So when you want to really look at what's driving inflation, look at who's buying the futures and betting on those prices to go up. If you and you're going to find out that it's a lot of wealthy hedge funds that are doing it.
Mhm.
And I'm not coming after the hedge funds, right? I'm just telling if people really want to see like where that's at, right? So like what I don't think people understand is even if oil drops on the market, let's say it dropped by 90% today. Well, unless the gasoline exchange comes down with it, you ain't going to see too much savings at the pump. And so we all know that stock markets and exchanges operate on not necessarily like emotion, but emotional responses to results or to statements.
Yep.
So when you have a Republican come in office and they go, we're going to tear down regulations and open up the fields for energy production. Well, that does help drive down the prices of energy. Why? Because they're betting on it. They're betting on it. We're going to have access to more supply. So that's what does that. And I don't think they talk about that enough to people. They just like to go, ooga booga booga, this is what this is. And that gives them, like, you're saying, it gives up, we said last week, is it gives a spot, somebody to blame. Right.
Yep.
And if we actually educated people, they would realize that to me, commodities exchanges are anti capitalist. People go, what are you talking about? It helps balance supply and price and demand. But to me, that completely goes against the whole idea of capitalism. Capitalism is I operate a company and I'll sell pork, you sell pork. I can make pork better for cheaper than you can. I can grow those pigs, organic, and I can do it cheaper than you, blah blah blah. And there's no commodity market controlling my price.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's where we have the problems that we have now. But they came out with the commodities exchanges to help create a floor for farmers. Because before they did that, farmers were going bankrupt. Like it's mainly the little guys at a record level. And so it's kind of like you got to find a balance, right? I think the government should have stepped in a different kind of way, rather than creating these markets that, while back then they were great, they helped establish a middle class. Today they're killing it. The commodities markets created the middle class in terms of affordability and sustaining a decent wage. Now they're killing it. So now all that stuff they gave everybody, woo, we're creating the middle class in America. Now they're taking it all right back.
And that's so. Um, so with where I live, um, it, there's always proposals for new businesses to come in. And when I say new businesses, I mean really just taking over whether it's the existing infrastructure or just another place to purchase whatever it is that you're going to purchase. And one of the propositions has been a Meyer, and I think it's called Meyer Fresh. I'm not entirely
Oh
sure
yeah,
on
I've
it,
heard of
but
those.
it's not like a full on Meyer
It's
where
a
you get your
smaller
t-shirts and
grocery
socks
store.
up. It's mostly just grocery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a mom and pop grocery store, right? That's very well known in the area, and people go there. And one of the big pushbacks on this Meyer Fresh coming to the area is, well, they're gonna close down, this mom and pop um, produce and meat market. It's like people are gonna go somewhere that they want to go to. So
Right.
if Meyer Fresh comes in and people are looking to not drive this way or that way to go to a full on Meyer. They just like the Meyer brand or the Meyer product, whatever it is. If they want to go there, they're going to go there much the same as if they still want to continue to go to the mom and pop, produce and deli. Like those people are not going to lose their customers. Like you have to be in the community for that long, like a lot of farmers markets, to be in the communities for that long. It's like now take that same mindset and flip it. For all of the people, I'm big on being a free market capitalist. I think, listen, I'm not see like I'm the type of person where some might say I'm frugal, some might just flat out call me cheap. But like for me, there are caps that I will not spend. Like I will not spend X amount on a certain product. Right. I'm just not going to do it. Um and to be able to, continue to try to grow your base. So when you see these businesses that are local businesses that have been in business for, since the 50s or since the 20s or whatever it is, the
Oh yeah.
1920s, not the 2020s, But it's like these people are trying to hold on, and they're trying to do it. In most cases, they're trying to do it morally, they're trying to do it ethically, they're trying to build a community of their team members or associates that are usually in the community. They try and provide a good service, a good product, and they're saying, the owners of these businesses are saying, hey, this is what we can afford to pay you. And so when so many people clamor for, oh, we need minimum wage to be $20 an hour, $25 an hour, it's like, okay, but you're also the same people who say we don't need Meyer to come in. We don't need another Meyer grocery store or a Kroger grocery store. We need Susie's Deli.
Right.
It's the same principle applies, because you're also the same people that are saying we need people to pay others twice as much as what they're paying. It's like, but Bob's Produce can't do that. They're
Right.
operating at, because they don't have the capacity. They're not ordering, you know, tens of millions of pounds of potatoes every single week to
Well,
supply
part
the.
I don't know if you remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s, like, and it was kind of like with healthcare that Republicans proposed a lot of is creating like, um, what was it? I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. What was it? Kind of like a group, right? Like, small businesses could form together to get it, or, come together
Mhm.
in like an insurance pool, right?
Yep.
I think that the government needs to help facilitate a similar thing for small businesses with supplies. You know what I mean? Like, can't because those groupings legally they have to be sanctioned by the government. For things of that nature. So,
Mhm.
I think and they can do that with certain things already. With like the Gordon's Foods, and you got things like that. But I'm talking like I'm not talking about companies. I'm talking about your local bar that uses Gordon Foods for their hamburgers, right? And everybody's like, "Oh, that's the best hamburger in the world," and it's like, yeah, the other place up the street uses the same patty. But that's a whole other story. It's just kind of how you
Right.
take care of the product is how it tastes.
Hmm.
But I think there needs to be more structures like that within the business community for small businesses and mom and pop shops. Like to me, the government should be pushing city councils and state governments, and I'm not talking about round tables where the government pays lip service, and they might pass one of 70 ideas if it even gets to that. I'm talking like like, hey, the governors or whoever sits down, city council sits down. All right, we got 9 flower shops in the area. Da da da. But we're having issues with supply A. What and I know that they do kind of talk to business, go, hey, what are our roadblocks? How can we help you? But I think it needs to be more of like a grouping, and these businesses are banded together to help make those changes, right? Like so, like a lot of I forget what's it. I think is it Ferndale or Royal Oak. One of them, they're turning like one of their main streets into like pretty much just like a where you walk and during the summertime get
There's a
past
few
the
of them. I know Northville does it for the summer. They
yeah
close off Main Street, and I can't remember if it's Ferndale or Royal. It sounds more like of a Ferndale thing, based on their demographic and their community. I mean, they're next door neighbors as it is, but it
right.
sounds more of a Ferndale thing. But yeah, Northville, one of the things they do is, especially in the summer, they close down Main Street, and it's just you can walk. And I know a lot of that started during the COVID and the pulling away from some of the COVID restrictions. But that was, and I know it's a totally separate conversation, nothing to do with it, but that also was when they were like, well, that's when they started introducing like alcohol to go and stuff like that. And you're like,
Right.
wait, wait.
Whereas before that, that was like a naughty thing that could get a business,
Yep,
owner put in jail.
yep,
You know,
exactly. You lose your liquor license and all that good fun stuff. Yeah, I think that the it's good when there are small, like, when there are the small groups of businesses that do come together. One of the problems I think we find is that, um, again, kind of as we talked about last week, it was, a business's goal is to make money.
right,
And so they're going to see other people as competition, and they don't want the competition. and it's a great theory, and it's a great,
Yeah, it
when you
wouldn't work for
when
probably
it what
most
yeah,
things, but
and that's the unfortunate part. um
I think what
because
they need
then
to get
it's one of
options.
those situations where, like, you can always take a bad situation and turn it worse by giving it over to the government. And this is one of those situations where you go, it's like, okay, we we should all just be banding together, and then but then you don't want one person, trying to take over this and buy this, or buy that. So you go, okay, but we need to have guidelines. Okay, who sets out the guidelines? The government. Well, now the government's getting involved. So now the government implements their regulations. And now with their regulations that they have, that increases the cost for everyone, because everyone has to have this certain type of, whatever, to whether to make the product or care for the product, whatever it is. And it's like, well, now the government needs to get their cut. So anytime the government is inserted into anything, it just creates nothing but problems and
Well,
disasters and headaches.
I was thinking we need to mimic more of kind of how the auto, because the auto industry kind of already has something like that, where like GM partners with Honda and things of that nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they have mutual needs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking in terms of like that, but for small business or retail. I don't think there's a whole lot of like I know you got like your local development authorities. You got I don't know, I'm drawing a blank on it. It's like the most common thing. You got rotaries. Business associations, but I'm talking things that are focused on certain, like if your area is like I don't know, like River Rouge, Michigan, right? Like everything's closing there, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, the state government, like, hey, how do we focus getting some small things in here, right? How do we band everybody together? Hey, okay, you know, they do things with bills, right? And they'll be like, hey, apply for this. They push. No, let's help businesses organize it. The government should be trying to facilitate. I don't know, the CEO of this company that seems, hey, come down. They're not your direct competition. Kind of help. Why? Because first, that's going to create more, to me, more longer term demand. It's going to help, raise wages to a degree, right? But it's also going to help keep communities clean, help lower crime. And this is without the government really getting involved. All the government is doing is kind of like creating a park where everybody's going to go meet type of thing.
Right.
And they do have that, but right now it's more built around lobbyists, or it's built around businesses coming to air their grievances, or joining the small business association, where it's only a certain group of people in a certain place fighting for you, supposedly. No, it needs to be like the mayor of a city going, all right, this is how we're going to do it, and there's different resources they can pull from, rather than it being based around the local 5 o'clock news. Hey, we helped Johnny's mom and pop shop fix their window today.
One of the things, so I kind of following that same line of thinking. So one of the things that I kind of almost view it as like a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So like where my wife works, right? It's a very, very, very large corporation, but then they also have, the franchise owners. And for like health insurance purposes, right? We're a part of the um we're a part of this. It's, even though the corporation is a very large corporation, it's still a small business, and it's still, but it's like, it's a large, it's like a large or small group, but they get a better rate to be able to
Right.
provide their employees for the health insurance coverage. And it is one of those things where you kind of look around and you go, okay, yeah, if we can actually formulate something like that,
Yeah, like
then it
I don't know
certainly
how it would
helps.
completely look, but I feel like
Hmm.
it would help. I feel like it would help disparage communities. Like, I won't disparage. That's maybe not the right word. Communities that are definitely on some hard luck times, right? Like you
Hmm.
got your Inkster, who 40, 50 years ago, Inkster was a really nice town. Now it's just like everything boarded up, and a lot of the businesses. There's nice pockets there. Don't get me wrong. Inkster's a good city. I know a lot of good people who live there. But then you got like Detroit, your Flints, things like that. Like if they were coming in, because it's great when a big business announces it's going to a certain community, right? It's going to do certain things, but that business only does so much, right? So if you can get a bunch of people who are, well, I'm going to go out and sweep my front in front of my store today. All of a sudden, if you can start multiplying that type of thing and creating a system to where they can go, okay, I buy tomatoes, you buy tomatoes, or I buy yarn, you buy yarn. All right, now we can start kind of pairing together in the community to have a bigger purchasing power. It doesn't even necessarily have to be within one city, right? It could be throughout the area, right? Or
Hmm.
even different types of, they can, to get bigger purchasing power. And you can kind of do that through places like Cisco Foods, right? But the government creates so many roadblocks for a group of small businesses to come together to just have a basic purchasing power. You'd have to start a whole another separate company rather than these business. I'm thinking kind of like, so when you want to create like a trust or something for like a nonprofit, right? Everybody kind of has like, everybody goes to the bank, we all sign off on it, da 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 da. You got so many people. A similar type of thinking, but with something to
Hmm.
help small businesses down on your local communities. I think that right there would give them a leg up to help them compete with the
It
Walmarts of the world.
the community pride has really gone by the wayside. And I know we kind of touched on it last time with trying to go to the park and things like that. And parks don't really exist anymore. And um, it was, I can't remember. I think it was like the last episode of Yellowstone. If you watch the
Mhm.
series, great. If not, and for
I've
people
watched
who have
some. I've
seen it,
watched some
they
of it.
they're familiar. But um, and I'm not quoting it directly, but he was saying it something to the effect of, you know, people will people will rebuild the things that they're running away from. So people
Yes.
will and the idea behind it of Yellowstone and the ranch and stuff is people will flee their their big cities and the concrete jungles. They'll flee that. They want something more more relaxing, more calm, slower tempo, a different way of life. But then once they move out to that area, they go, oh, I could really go for a Trader Joe's being built. I could really go for three McDonald's and two Starbucks around the corner. And it's like, so they left that for because they wanted to escape it. And then wherever they end up, they want to rebuild it with, oh, let's do new condos now and let's do new this.
Hmm.
And and so we've gotten so far away from again that community pride. People only like to say where they live if they know it's got a good reputation or makes them sound better than what they are. And
Yeah.
that's just I mean that's just the reality. Like there's some so again kind of over by where I live. Um it's so awesome to see when the businesses like when they get like a little facelift, like
Hmm.
they all get, and usually obviously it's the landlord that does it, but the businesses I'm sure are pushing the people because they're they're leasing the spots, but they're pushing the landlord saying, hey man, we could really, so then they all pitch in together, and then you know they give the landlord enough to cover, and they're like, hey man, let's get the building painted, we want some new signage or something, and it's just a little refresh, and you don't see it all the time, but when you do see it, and the reason I'm mentioning it is because there's a few places in my area that have recently done it, and it makes such a huge difference because then you look across the street at the ones that haven't done it and the landlords that just don't seem to care whatsoever. It's like, man, just a little bit, because now when you've got the signage that has the holes or the tears or everything's faded, you go, I don't know if I want to walk in here. I don't know if I want to try and purchase some ground beef from this butcher. It's like ah. But then you
It's
see the
like
one
that.
that's got you got the one you see the one that's got the facelift. They've both been in the community for the same amount of time, and
Right.
so like I said, it's that community pride that, like, yeah, you want to be able to say, oh yeah, stop over at Joe's Produce, because it's absolutely awesome and the people there are amazing and they put out a good product, and look at the building is all nice and clean. But we don't have that sense of pride, and I know pride goeth before our fall. I digress. We like I said, we just don't have that. We don't have that pride. And a lot of places you go, customer service is down across the board, and so it's one of those things where sometimes you get that cashier, depending upon when you go to a store, and you get that interaction with a cashier, and you're like, man, that's the first time I had an interaction, with a cashier in 3 months where they weren't on their phone, or you hear them complaining about their job or whatever it is. And so we, as a whole, as a society, we've created the mess that we're walking through right now. We've done it to
Yeah.
ourselves, unfortunately.
Well, man, we definitely had some good conversation today. Man, wow, we're like
Hmm.
over an hour or at an hour.
Yeah.
The wife's gonna want me to cook some dinner.
Never a bad
Making
thing.
some,
I think it's time to go fire up some food myself.
I'm making some chili lime Dano's salmon tonight, so that should be
That sounds pretty
salmon.
fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be air fried, so you know. These days, the
Can't,
older I get,
can't,
the less regular
can't,
fried foods I can tolerate.
can, cannot beat the air fryer. It's so convenient too, especially when you don't want to
It
do a
is.
bunch of dishes or anything
Oh
afterwards.
my god, I know. You know, my next purchase, because you know my stove. When we got this house, we bought it off my in laws. It was a rental my father in law had, but the stove that they had here was their stove from when I don't know wherever they lived, like 30, 40 years ago. And I'm like, well, if it works, I'm not going to go buy a new one. That's how I
Exactly.
am. If it works, I'm not going to replace it. I don't care if it doesn't look the greatest.
Yep.
But now the one, and so we got a new microwave, and I was like, oh man, I can heat up a piece of pizza in under a minute. You know, it used to take like I'd had the old one. You know, my son would be like, I want a piece of okay, it had to hit like a minute 15 seconds. And I'm like, good lord. And you know, now this one, man, it's like, hey, 30 seconds, and then yank it because that thing is gonna be blistering. So you know, and then I'm like, man, it takes so long to boil a pot of water. So you know, but the reason I was saying is the next one, next we've been looking at stoves is a lot of these stoves now you can get to have the air fryer built into them. You just got to get the basket. And
Yep.
I'm like, okay, that would save counter space right there. That's to me, that's innovation. Okay,
The
that's
one
innovation.
the one that we have, the stove that we purchased, because when we purchased the home, like yeah, the appliances came with it, but it was, I mean, the lady lived here for 40 years, and that was it worked, and it tried to work. It was more so, it wasn't necessarily because everything in our house is gas, thank God. And the stovetop worked well. The oven, you'd hear it kick on and then shut off and kick on and shut off. And then so we purchased one just a couple of years ago, and it's got the air fryer and all that other stuff. But still, the Ninja air fryer that we have, you just drop everything in there.
Yeah, that's.
You don't gotta worry about anything. You drop it in there, and you let it go for
I
however
swear by
long.
Ninja products. Great reliability. I mean, I have a Ninja tea kettle. Boom, man. You know, we have Ninja coffee pot blender. Um, I mean, God, we got so many. Oh, I got a Ninja crock pot. Um, I swear by that thing because
That's
my God, I used to hate when my wife would use those porcelain crock pots and it's like
the
trying to scrape crap
the
off of
one
there.
we have. I think I got it for my wife for Christmas, but it's I think it's like a 9-in-1 or a 10-in-1. It's a crock pot, hot plate, all that. It's the
Yeah,
Ninja,
yeah,
and
yeah, it's.
and
I
it's
think they
yeah,
had it for
and
like $100.
you can use it for everything. So between that and the
Yeah,
air fryer, we have uh coffee maker, espresso machine type thing, like everything. Yeah, most of the appliances, I think, aside from our tea kettle, is a Ninja product.
now, if Ninja really wanted, they make such good products. If they bought a stove, I'd be camping out to buy it because I
They,
trust their products that much. You know,
I
like
think, don't they have?
I'm
Uh,
talking like you know your traditional home stove. You know, they got like
I
things
got
that kind of that are like that. But
you.
I
Yeah,
would because they're so innovative in a lot of things they do. If they made a stove, I'm telling you, man, that company would probably record
some
record
people
profits and
I
triple
have
growth.
seen, because there's a like a meat smoking group that
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the social media. Can't remember exactly which one it is, but some people have asked, and there's some good testimonials regarding
The pellet
the
smoker.
Ninja, yeah, the smoker, and they're like,
Yep.
listen, man, if it's something smaller or you're going out camping and you've got a little generator, fire that thing up, man, that you're gonna get a pretty good product out of it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they
That's
definitely make a good product for sure, 100%.
yeah. I swear by Ninja, man. I just do. You know, I got their knives too. So you know. But you know, all right, man. Well, you know, it was definitely good. You know, I'm thinking probably next Sunday. You know, we're going to be tackling that toxic masculinity podcast. You know, my
Awesome.
friend, she's you know, she's like a extremely crazy busy person. She was even when she worked for me way back in the yonder year of horse and buggies. You know, just one of those people that's just busy, 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 man.
Right.
So you know, kind of nailing her down. But yeah, you know, that one I think definitely is going to be a huge
Cool,
uh,
cool. Yeah.
you know,
Were you
so
thinking? Were you thinking Saturday or Sunday? I know Sunday's Mother's Day.
oh shoot, that is right. Sunday is Mother's Day. Ooh, good lord. Don't tell my wife I said that. That is actually a good thing. So it probably would be a Saturday then.
Okay.
I'll hit her up, and I get a little bit more of an idea, and go from there.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, man. I appreciate it. And
Yeah.
I'll probably because I'm getting things done a little bit early in the home tonight. I'll probably edit this, cut it, and post it